I want to preface this by saying that I'm not the kind of person who believes in ghosts. I don't buy into paranormal TV shows or YouTube spirit hunters with their gadgets and jump scares. I've always thought of myself as grounded, maybe even a little boring. But something happened to me on Highway 152 near Pacheco Pass that I haven't been able to explain. And the more time passes, the more I wonder if I was just unlucky enough to stumble onto something I wasn't supposed to see. This was late September of last year, right around the time the air was finally starting to cool after another brutal Central Valley summer. I work in logistics, nothing exciting, and at the time my job had me driving across California constantly. That night I was headed west toward Gilroy after a drop-off in Los Banos. It was about 11:30 p.m., maybe closer to midnight, and the sky was so clear you could see the stars. The kind of night where the darkness doesn't feel suffocating but wide open, like the world stretches out forever. I'd taken Highway 152 plenty of times. Anyone who drives that route knows it's not exactly the safest road. There's a reason locals call it Blood Alley. The lanes are narrow, winding, and drivers barrel down them at insane speeds. I've seen more than a few wrecks over the years. Cars folded in half, pickup trucks nose down in ditches, emergency lights painting the asphalt red. But I was comfortable enough with the route, and that night the traffic was light. I remember feeling tired but not exhausted. I'd had coffee at a truck stop earlier and rolled the windows down to let the cool air keep me sharp. The road hummed under my tires, and the radio was tuned low, some late-night talk show about baseball trades that I wasn't really listening to. For a while, it was just me, the highway, and the night. Somewhere around the turnoff for Dinosaur Point, I noticed headlights in my rearview mirror. Not unusual. Plenty of truckers and late-night commuters use the route. What struck me, though, was how quickly the lights closed in. One moment they were distant, the next, they were practically riding my bumper. I muttered something under my breath, tightened my grip on the wheel, and kept my speed steady. But then I realized something odd. The lights weren't moving like a normal car's would. There was no sway, no bounce over the uneven pavement. They just stayed fixed in the mirror, perfectly level, like they weren't headlights at all but two orbs of light locked onto me. I squinted, trying to make out the vehicle, but it was too dark behind me. About a mile later, the lights were simply gone. Not fading back, not turning off at an exit, just gone like someone had flipped a switch. The sudden absence of them made my stomach clench. I flicked the mirror up, muttering, "Weird," to myself, and tried to shrug it off. But the unease stayed with me. I kept driving, telling myself not to think about it, and eventually pulled off near a small turnout. I wanted to stretch my legs, maybe splash some water on my face before the final push into Gilroy. The turnout was one of those gravel patches with just enough room for a couple cars to stop. There was no one else there, just me and the chirping of crickets in the brush. The air smelled faintly of dust and eucalyptus. When I stepped out, the cool night hit me harder than I expected, and I shivered. I leaned against the car, lit a cigarette, something I only ever do on the road, and looked up at the stars. For a moment, it was peaceful. Then I heard it. The sound was faint at first, like the shuffle of footsteps on gravel. My first thought was that another driver had pulled in without me noticing. But when I glanced around, the turnout was still empty. The sound continued, though, slow, deliberate crunches of gravel, like someone pacing just outside the reach of the headlights. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. No answer. The cigarette burned down to my fingers before I realized I'd been standing frozen, listening. I dropped it, crushed it under my shoe, and decided it was time to get back in the car. That's when I saw him. He was standing in the middle of the highway, maybe 50 feet away, directly in the glow of my headlights. A man, tall, pale, and motionless. His arms hung at his sides, but they didn't look right. They seemed too long, like his elbows bent lower than they should, his hands almost brushing his knees. His face was indistinct, washed out by the glare, but I swear I could see his mouth hanging open as if mid-scream. My heart slammed against my ribs. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, convinced I was just tired and seeing things. But when I looked again, he was still there. I scrambled into the driver's seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. The figure didn't move, didn't flinch at the sound. I gripped the wheel and muttered to myself, "It's just some guy messing around." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. I pulled out onto the highway, half expecting to drive straight through him. But as my headlights swept over the spot, the road was empty. No man, no footprints, nothing. Just asphalt stretching into the dark. I drove the rest of the way to Gilroy with the radio blasting, every muscle in my body tense. By the time I reached my motel, I'd convinced myself it was just fatigue messing with my head. A trick of the light, maybe. Nothing more. That would have been easier to accept if not for what happened the next morning. I checked out of the motel, grabbed coffee, and started back east. Somewhere near the same stretch of highway, I saw flashing lights up ahead. A crash. 2 cars had collided head-on, their metal twisted and smoking. The paramedics were already there, pulling bodies from the wreckage. I slowed down as I passed, my stomach in knots. For a split second, I thought I saw him again, standing at the edge of the scene, watching silently as the EMTs worked. Same, pale figure, same dangling arms. When I blinked, he was gone. I don't drive Highway 152 at night anymore. I take the longer routes, the slower roads. People tell me I'm being paranoid, that it's just a dangerous stretch of highway with too many accidents, and maybe they're right. But every time I think back to that pale figure standing in the road, I feel the same cold dread creeping up my spine. And I can't shake the thought that maybe he isn't just a ghost. Maybe he's something older, something that waits for drivers to stop, watches them from the dark, and feeds on the wrecks that follow. Maybe next time, he won't just watch. I stayed at the Roosevelt Hotel in Hollywood 2 years ago, in November of 2022. It wasn't supposed to be anything unusual. I was in Los Angeles for work, a 3-day conference downtown, and by the time I booked, the convention center hotels were sold out. A friend recommended the Roosevelt. Old Hollywood charm, she said. Marilyn Monroe stayed there, it's iconic. I didn't think much of it except that it was a little pricier than I wanted, but still manageable. When I pulled up, the sun had just gone down. It was a Tuesday, maybe 6:15 p.m., and the boulevard was lit in that gaudy neon way that makes Hollywood feel like it's trying too hard. The air was chilly for LA, mid-50s, and the sidewalk smelled faintly of roasted peanuts from a cart near the theater. The hotel looked grand in the way old things look grand when you squint past the cracks. A glowing marquee, palm trees strung with lights, valet guys in red jackets moving fast between cars. Inside, the lobby was dim, intentionally moody, with old chandeliers that hummed faintly. The floor tiles were worn smooth and glossy, and a mural of Spanish conquistadors loomed over the check-in desk. The air smelled faintly of polish, dust, and something floral that didn't quite mask the age. Was given a room on the 9th floor. I remember the elevator shuddering as it went up, and the way the doors opened too slowly, like they were thinking about it. My room was fine, not fancy, but big enough, with a king bed and heavy drapes. The furniture was old but solid, the kind that's been there longer than you've been alive. The first night was uneventful. I got dinner downstairs, answered a few emails, and went to sleep early. The mattress was firm, the room was quiet, and I didn't stir until morning. The second night was when things began. It was late, maybe just after midnight. I'd been out with coworkers at a bar down the street, and I came back a little buzzed. The hallway was long and mostly dark except for little sconces that flickered. I passed a maid's cart abandoned against the wall, though it was long past housekeeping hours. I slipped into my room, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed on the bed without bothering to undress. I don't remember drifting off, just that I was suddenly awake again. The room was black, but I had the strangest sensation that someone else was in there with me. I told myself it was the alcohol, rolled over, and tried to sleep. That was when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong. It was faint, muffled, but distinct, a gasping like someone trying to breathe through a blocked throat. A wet, strangled intake of air. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped. The room was too still. My ears strained, waiting for it again, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my head. I got up, turned on the lamp, and looked around. Nobody. Just the beige carpet, the dresser, my suitcase on the rack. The curtains were drawn tight. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I even crouched to look under the bed. Nothing. I told myself it had come from the hallway or maybe another room through the vents. Thin walls, old building. That was all. I kept the lamp on after that. Around 3 a.m., I must have dozed because I woke choking. My throat burned, like something was pressed hard against it, and I jerked up, clawing at my neck. My hands found nothing, but the sensation was real. Tightness, pressure, the desperate panic of not being able to breathe. I stumbled from the bed, gagging, and the feeling released all at once, like it had never been there. I stood in the middle of the carpet, chest heaving, my mouth dry, staring at the mirror over the desk. For a moment I swore my reflection didn't move with me, but when I blinked it was back in sync. I didn't sleep again. In the morning I tried to laugh it off, just stress, alcohol, and an overactive imagination. Except when I looked at my throat in the bathroom mirror, there were faint red marks around it. Not scratches, but bands, as if something invisible had cinched tight and let go. That day at the conference, I kept rubbing my neck. When I got back to the hotel that evening, I was determined not to let my mind play tricks. I kept the TV on, ordered room service, and sat up working until well past midnight. That was when I heard it again. Not faint this time. A full, ragged choking. It came from the corner near the drapes. I froze. The sound went on, desperate, uneven, a person fighting for air. My instinct was to rush forward to help whoever was there, but there was nobody. Just the thick curtains drawn against the night. The lamp flickered once and went out. The choking sound swelled, filling the whole room now, as if someone was dying inches from me. And then it stopped. Not gradually. Cut off. The silence after was worse than the noise. I yanked open the drapes, nothing outside but the glowing boulevard, headlights gliding past. I slept with them open, the city lights seeping in, waiting for dawn. At breakfast the next morning I asked the waitress, half joking, if the place was haunted. She gave me a long look before forcing a smile. "People say that," she said, "especially about the Blossom Ballroom, but management doesn't like us talking about it." "What about the rooms?" I asked. Her smile faltered, just a fraction. "You should keep your curtains open. It helps." That was all she'd say that night. I checked out. I didn't care about the penalty fee. I couldn't stay another minute. The front desk clerk didn't even blink when I said I was leaving early. He just nodded, typed something, and slid me the bill. As I turned away, I thought I heard him mutter, "Happens a lot." Back home, I told myself it was exhaustion, maybe sleep paralysis. I tried to forget it. But here's the part I haven't told anyone. Sometimes I still wake up choking. Not often, once every couple of months. Always in the dead of night. My throat burning, my chest tightening. And each time, for the briefest second before I can move, I swear I hear it again, that strangled, wet gasping right beside my ear. I don't know if something followed me home from that room, or if it was always with me and the Roosevelt just made me see it. All I know is that the marks come back and they're getting darker. It was the middle of October when I first set foot inside the Los Feliz mansion. Not during one of those gaudy, haunted tour events. Not with a group of drunk 20-somethings daring each other to sneak past the overgrown hedges and rusted gate. I went in alone, and I went in quietly. I should explain how I got there. I've been obsessed with Los Angeles's forgotten corners since I moved here in 2012. Not Hollywood Boulevard with its choked sidewalks and grime, not Venice with its Instagrammers and fake mystics, but the hidden bones of the city, the abandoned diners on San Fernando, the weed-eaten motels along Whittier, the once grand apartments where the tiles are cracked and no one answers the buzzers anymore. I take photos, sometimes write little essays for my blog. Usually it's all harmless. But the Perelson mansion had always gnawed at me. The story is famous if you live here long enough. December 6, 1959, Dr. Harold Perelson bludgeoned his wife, Lillian, to death in her sleep with a ball-peen hammer. His teenage daughter heard the sounds, ran screaming, and he told her to go lie down. "This is a nightmare, go back to sleep." Minutes later, he drank acid and died in the armchair. The house sat frozen after that, holiday decorations still up, presents wrapped under the tree. Eventually it was sold, but no one stayed. Neighbors swore people moved in and left within weeks. For decades, the house was empty except for trespassers who came back pale, shaken, and unwilling to talk about what they'd heard inside. I told myself I'd just take pictures. That was all. It was a Thursday evening, around 6, the sky starting to bruise purple with those long horizontal clouds you only see in Southern California. The neighborhood itself was hushed, the kind of eerie wealth where the air feels privately owned. The Pearlson house was easy enough to spot. Spanish Revival. Bones hidden under vines, windows like black eyes peering out. The iron gate creaked when I nudged it open, the sound absurdly loud against the stillness of the street. Inside the yard, the smell hit me first. Old leaves, damp rot, but layered with something metallic, faint like rust or blood that had been washed away but not forgotten. I found a side door already jimmied open, probably from kids or vandals, and slipped in. My sneakers made no sound on the tile, though I swear I could hear the faint clicking of someone else's heels ahead of me. The first thing that struck me was how intact it all was. Not pristine exactly, but frozen. A yellowed lampshade leaned at an angle as if someone had just gotten up. The wallpaper curled back in spots showing the plaster, but family portraits were still nailed to the walls. On the mantel, a set of dusty stockings hung limp, each embroidered with a name: Harold, Lillian, Judy, Joel, Debbie. I was careful. I'd been in abandoned houses before, and they always carry the same fragile silence, like the whole place is, holding its breath. I took a photo of the stockings, another of the staircase curling upward. My camera shutter echoed far louder than it should have. Then I heard it. A dragging sound upstairs. Slow, deliberate. Like something metal scraping across wood. I froze. Every instinct in me screamed to leave, but the sound stopped as quickly as it had started. The silence afterward felt heavier, almost alive. I whispered to myself, "It's the pipes. It's just the pipes." But pipes don't sound like that. I edged toward the staircase. Halfway up, I noticed the family portrait again, this time from an angle where I could see Harold's eyes. In every reproduction online, he just looked like any stern 1950s father. But in that dim hallway, the glass over the portrait seemed to glint, and his face looked wrong. Like the corners of his mouth had been stretched downward, caught in a silent scream. I told myself it was the light, just the light. Upstairs smelled different, stronger. Old iron, wet wood, something chemical still clinging after all these years. I passed a half-open bedroom door and glimpsed a twin bed, sheets still tucked in tight. A doll slumped against the pillow with its porcelain face cracked down the middle. The dragging sound came again, directly above me now. I forced myself down the hall, camera shaking in my hands. At the far end, I found the master bedroom. The bed frame was still there, stripped bare except for the faded outline of where a mattress had once sat. The walls were yellowed, a dark patch blooming near the headboard. I don't remember deciding to step inside, but I did, and as soon as I crossed the threshold, the air dropped. Not like a draft, not like the AC kicking on. It was the kind of cold that needles into your bones. That's when I heard it. A wet, rattling inhale. I spun, camera flashing automatically, and for a split second the room lit up. In that frozen flash, I swear I saw a man sitting in the corner, chair. His posture too stiff, his face slack but twisted, a ball-peen hammer dangling loose in his right hand. His eyes locked on me. Then the light was gone, and the chair was empty. I didn't wait to take another photo. I bolted down the hall, the sound of footsteps pounding the floorboards behind me, though I was certain I was alone. At the top of the stairs, I felt something slam hard into my shoulder, spinning me sideways. My hand scraped against the wall, leaving blood on the peeling wallpaper, I stumbled the rest of the way down, not daring to look back. The whole house groaned then, like every nail and beam had exhaled at once. I don't remember crossing the yard, only that I suddenly found myself outside on the cracked driveway, lungs burning, the gate swinging wide behind me, though I hadn't touched it. Neighbors say no one stays long in that house. I believe it now. Because even weeks later, when I developed the photos, I found something I can't explain. In the shot of the mantel, where the stockings hang, there's a figure reflected in the dark window beside it. Not me. The shoulders are too broad, the head tilted at an impossible angle. And in the reflection, just above the shape's head, you can see the faint outline of something small dangling, like a child's stocking swaying in air that shouldn't be moving. I deleted every picture after that, but sometimes late at night when the city goes quiet and the air outside feels too still, I hear it again. That faint, deliberate dragging sound, metal against wood, somewhere upstairs, waiting. It was the fall of 2019 when I decided to hike out to Devil's Gate Dam. I had lived in Pasadena most of my life, and like anyone local, I knew about the stories. People said the place had a bad history, that the jagged rocks along the spillway formed the face of a devil when the light hit them right. Older folks whispered about kids who went missing in the 50s, about Jack Parsons and his strange occult experiments nearby, about voices that carried in the tunnels under the dam. But to me, it was just another piece of local folklore. Creepy, sure, but nothing more than exaggerated campfire tales. That day, September 28th, started ordinary. It was one of those clear Southern California afternoons where the air feels dry enough to crack your lips. The sun hung low and golden, the kind of late-day light that throws long shadows across the San Gabriel Mountains. I parked my car off Oak Grove Drive near the golf course and followed the trail down into the Arroyo Seco. The dam rose out of the landscape like some relic of a forgotten civilization. Massive slabs of weather-stained concrete, framed by walls of sandstone and brush. I remember the smell. Sun-baked earth mixed with the faint metallic tang of stagnant water pooling at the base. I had no reason to be there other than curiosity. I had been reading about the missing children, the ones who disappeared without a trace. Donald Baker, Brenda Howell, and others. Some claimed they were abducted by a drifter. Some swore the tunnels swallowed them. I didn't buy into either theory, but I figured I'd walk around, take some photos, maybe see if the place carried any of that oppressive energy people talked about. At first, nothing felt strange. The air was hot, cicadas buzzing somewhere in the chaparral. A few crows sat on the rocks, calling out like hecklers as I climbed down toward the spillway. The graffiti on the concrete looked old, faded tags overlapping pentagrams, names, dates. Most of it was nonsense, the kind of edgy stuff bored kids leave behind. But there were fresher marks too, small chalk drawings of stick figures holding hands. Some were faint, washed out from the last rain, but a few looked like they had been drawn just days ago. I told myself it was just local kids screwing around. But the more I walked, the more I noticed the drawings repeated. Always 3 or 4 stick figures holding hands, standing in a row. Sometimes there was a taller one drawn just behind them. The tunnels themselves gaped like black mouths beneath the dam, swallowing what little light managed to reach down there. I hadn't planned on going in. Honestly, I didn't even bring a flashlight. But when I got close enough to feel the cool air pouring out of the nearest drain, something caught my attention. It sounded faint, almost like water dripping deep inside. But then the sound shifted, carrying an edge of something else. It was high-pitched, quick. Laughter. I froze. The noise echoed strangely, bouncing against concrete and stone, making it hard to tell exactly where it was coming from. For a long minute, I just stood there trying to convince myself it was a bird or maybe another hiker. But the trail had been empty, and the laughter, if that's what it was, didn't sound adult. It was the giggling of children. "Hello?" I called, my voice coming out too sharp, cracking slightly at the end. The echo that came back made me instantly regret speaking. My words seemed to chase themselves down the tunnel, returning warped and distant. The laughter stopped. I stood there longer than I want to admit. The cicadas seemed quieter now, the whole place suddenly still. Finally, I turned back toward the main trail, telling myself I'd had enough. I'd go home, grab a beer, chalk it up to acoustics playing tricks. But as I started up the dirt path, I noticed something I swear hadn't been there before. Half buried in the dust was a child's shoe. Small, pink, the kind with a little cartoon character stitched into the side. It was worn down, the rubber sole cracked. I bent to pick it up, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to touch it. I just stared, then backed away slowly, pulse thudding in my ears. That night, lying in bed, I tried to forget about it. I told myself it was just some old discarded shoe, that the laughter was an echo from somewhere else. But sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those stick figure drawings, 4 of them, holding hands, the taller one looming just behind. Over the next week, I couldn't stop thinking about Devil's Gate. I went online, reading every article, every Reddit post, every scrap of information I could find. People wrote about hearing voices, seeing shadows in the tunnels. Some claimed the missing children were sacrificed in rituals. Others that they were still there, trapped somehow, calling out to anyone who wandered too close. Against better judgment, I went back the following Saturday. This time I brought a flashlight. The air was cooler that day, the sky overcast, which somehow made the dam feel even heavier, as though the concrete itself carried a charge. I made my way down again, heart hammering the closer I got to the tunnels. The stick figures were still there, more of them than before. Some looked freshly drawn, white chalk so bright it almost glowed. I crouched near the mouth of the largest drain, shining my light inside. The beam cut through dust and damp, illuminating the rough concrete walls. Farther in, the tunnel bent slightly to the left, swallowed by shadow. I listened. At first, only silence. Then faintly, from deep within, I heard it again. Children, laughing. This time I didn't call out. I just stood there, gripping the flashlight so tightly my knuckles ached. The sound grew louder but not closer, as though it was circling inside, weaving through corridors I couldn't see. The laugh wasn't joyful either. It was hollow, brittle, the way kids laugh when they're scared but trying not to show it. Then came something else. A whisper, low and flat. It wasn't words, not exactly. More like breath being forced through the tunnel, syllables forming at the edges of hearing. My skin went cold, goosebumps crawling up my arms. I backed away, step by step, until the tunnel swallowed the light of my flashlight and the whispers sank back into silence. When I turned to leave, I froze. Someone had drawn new stick figures in the dust behind me. 4 of them fresh, their lines still sharp. I hadn't heard anyone approach, and yet there they were. And this time, the tallest figure wasn't behind the others. It was standing, off to the side, arm extended as though reaching toward me. I ran. I didn't stop until I was back at my car, lungs burning, hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. Driving home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half convinced I'd see that tall stick figure sitting in the back seat. That night, I left the shoe on my front porch. I don't know why. Maybe to convince myself it wasn't following me. When I woke the next morning, the shoe was gone. In its place was a faint chalk drawing, 4 figures holding hands, traced in white dust across my welcome mat. I haven't gone back to Devil's Gate Dam since. I moved apartments a few months later. But sometimes, late at night, when the neighborhood is quiet, I swear I hear it, again. That brittle laughter echoing faintly from somewhere just beyond the walls. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I see the drawings. Not 4 figures anymore. 5. The 5th is always taller, and it's always reaching for me. It was the second week of October 2019 when I first saw her. I remember the date exactly because it was the day after my uncle's funeral, and I had driven up from Los Angeles to San Jose on almost no sleep. The drive along the 101 had been long and uneventful until I decided, stupidly, to take El Camino Real instead of sticking to the freeway. I'd been telling myself I wanted to see more of the old California, the parts that still felt alive with history, but the truth was I didn't want to sit in bumper-to-bumper traffic with my own thoughts pressing in on me. It was just past 7 p.m. when I got onto El Camino near Santa Clara. The sky had that orange haze you only get in California fall evenings, the light bleeding through a layer of smog and wildfire smoke drifting down from Napa. The air smelled, faintly, of burnt wood, and the heat from the asphalt hadn't quite let go yet. My rental car's AC made a low whistle, the kind that gets under your skin if you drive too long without music. I rolled the windows down halfway to breathe in something real, and that's when I noticed her. She was walking barefoot along the shoulder of the road, her long white dress brushing against her ankles. At first I thought she was just some homeless woman. You see people like that all the time out here, wandering, lost, half in another world. But there was something wrong about the way she moved. Not staggering, not drunk. Slow, deliberate steps, like each one carried the weight of a ritual. I slowed the car, instinct maybe, or morbid curiosity. As I got closer, I saw she was crying, her face tilted down so her dark hair veiled her features. My stomach tightened. She didn't belong there. Nobody walks that stretch of El Camino after dark. Against every ounce of common sense, I rolled down my window the rest of the way as I pulled up beside her. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked, leaning over the passenger seat. My voice sounded too loud, bouncing against the low drone of traffic behind me. She stopped walking. Didn't look at me, didn't answer, just went still in a way that made the hair on my arms lift. Then, as if she'd heard some cue I hadn't, she turned her head toward me. And I swear to you, her eyes weren't there. Just black hollows, dark as tar, streaked with something wet that glistened under the last shred of daylight. I gasped and jerked back in my seat so hard I nearly swerved into the lane. My tires screeched as I pulled forward, heart hammering, vision blurring from the adrenaline spike. In the rearview mirror, I saw her step off the shoulder and into the road, the white fabric of her dress glowing in the oncoming headlights. The driver behind me honked, swerved, and when I glanced back again, she was gone. Just gone. I didn't tell anyone. Who would believe me? I spent that night in my hotel room staring at the popcorn ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. My rational brain tried to file it away as exhaustion, grief, maybe even a hallucination brought on by the stress of the funeral. I almost convinced myself until it happened again. 2 nights later, I was heading back down El Camino after visiting a friend in Palo Alto. Different stretch of road, same hour, same pale glow of twilight. And there she was again. This time, I didn't slow down. I gripped the wheel so tight my knuckles ached and kept my eyes locked on the lanes ahead. But even at 45 miles an hour, I saw enough. She was standing perfectly still at the edge of the sidewalk, facing the traffic. Not walking, not crying, just waiting. And as I passed, her head snapped toward me so fast it was like her neck should have broken. Her hollow sockets locked onto me through the glass, and I swear I felt the temperature inside my car drop 10 degrees in a single second. I drove until I hit Mountain View before pulling off, shaking so hard I could barely shift the gear into park. My hands smelled faintly metallic, like I'd been holding coins. I sat there parked in a strip mall lot, staring at nothing for nearly half an hour before I worked up the courage to keep driving. I tried to avoid El Camino after that. But it cuts through everything out here, a thread tying together city after city. You can't live in the Bay Area without touching it at some point. And every time I did, every single time I saw her. Sometimes walking, sometimes standing. Once I saw her kneeling in the middle of a crosswalk, her long hair spread around her shoulders. And the car ahead of me passed right through her like she wasn't there at all. I started researching. Old mission records, local legends, police reports. The woman in white on El Camino isn't new. She's been seen for decades. Some say she's the spirit of a woman who died giving birth in one of the missions. Others say she's mourning the thousands of indigenous people who were enslaved, tortured, buried nameless under the foundations of the churches. I even found a thread buried on some forgotten forum where a man claimed he'd picked her up once years ago. He said she got into his car without a word, her wet hair dripping onto the seat, and when he tried to drop her off, she vanished. His car was later found on the side of the road, engine running, door open, no trace of him. I want to say I don't believe that part. But here's the thing. I don't drive at night anymore. Not if I can help it. Because the last time I saw her was in March of 2020, just before the pandemic shut everything down. I was driving home late from a work event, too tired to take the freeway, and there she was, standing directly in the middle of the road this time. I slammed the brakes so hard the car skidded sideways. She didn't move, didn't flinch. Her dress fluttered in the wind, and her arms slowly raised, palms open as if reaching for me. My headlights illuminated her face in full, and I saw that her tears weren't blood, not exactly. They were darker, thicker, like oil seeping from a wound in the earth itself. I blinked, and she was gone. My car idled in the middle of El Camino, empty road stretching in both directions. When I got home, my front door was wide open. I live alone. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was out of place. Except for one thing. On my kitchen counter sat a single white feather, damp to the touch, with the faint smell of smoke clinging to it. I locked every window, every door, and didn't sleep that night. I haven't told this story until now because putting it into words makes it too real. But I can't keep it inside anymore, because last week, for the first time in years, I drove down El Camino in the daylight, thinking it would be safe. And there she was, standing in broad afternoon sun, her face turned away this time. My stomach turned cold when I realized she doesn't just belong to the night. I don't know what she wants or why she shows herself to me. I only know that every time I see her, she's closer to my lane. And sooner or later, I think she's going to get in.